This is a Pasco Media production. Please visit pascomedia.com.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. This is the show where we explore the miraculous nature of the mundane as we look at one part of the Catholic tradition to help you engage more fully in the practice of faith. Past episodes are available at renovopodcast.com. I'm Doug Tuke, and I have been wanting to do this show forever. I am super excited about it. Juan Diego and Our Lady of Guadalupe. And the reason I'm excited about it is because I just stumbled on a wicked awesome book about it, and I'm just swimming in it. I want to make this story as public as possible. I want to tell this story to the world. It's just so, it's so good. Okay, so we want to get into it. This might be just a little bit longer than our usual podcast because there's kind of a lot to it, and I don't want to do a disservice to the beauty of this tradition. So let's just dig in, and we'll see where it takes us, okay? So here we go. When Christopher Columbus arrived in America, okay, the church, you have to understand, moved super quick to basically establish control over this new territory. So in 1493, 1 year after Columbus' famous voyage, Pope Alexander VI throws out a papal bull dividing the new territory between Spain and Portugal, basically provided the natives were converted to Catholicism. That had to happen. So as Hernan Cortez, not a super good guy, tore through the Aztec Empire, he was following a letter of instruction from the Pope that said the first, quote, the first aim of your expedition is to serve God and spread the Christian faith. That's a big deal. People need to know that, okay? So this came from the Pope, all right? Now, the architects of this whole thing were Spanish, all right? So after the fall of I'm going to say this wrong, Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital, yeah, go with that, look it up on Google, they assumed that they were just kind of defeated. That was it. They were done, right? So more thoroughly than the tribes that had not previously formed part of an empire, they were enslaved. So if they were not running away, they were enslaved. And their first task was to clear the Aztecs themselves, the rubble of their own destroyed capital, and then using the stones from those temples and pyramids to build these new churches and palaces of basically the new masters. And those were the Spanish. But the craftsmen that were building all this stuff were Indian, were Aztec, and their skills and their just kind of their style, their taste really kind of added a unique ornateness of the stone carvings covering all this kind of new church architecture, which is pretty cool. So from the early 16th century, in fact, this kind of a new style, what we now call Mexican colonial, that's where it actually came from. It was born combining kind of Baroque and Aztec. How cool is that? Okay, so they created magnificent buildings. It was unbelievable, right? So in urban areas, these Aztecs, the Indians, resigned themselves to their fate, right? They recognized that they were totally defeated, and as they were defeated, their gods were defeated, and then they gradually kind of transferred all their loyalty to the god of the Spaniards. So Catholic missionaries, in turn, they accepted this sort of blending of Christianity with other religious traditions of the Indians. So the concept of building churches on or near the sites of the temples really enabled the Indians to really kind of continue their pilgrimages that they already had culturally built. And by no small chance, it was close to the sanctuary of the goddess Tonatzin on the hill of Tepeyac outside Mexico City that the dark Virgin of Guadalupe first appeared to Juan Diego on December 12th, 1531. We'll talk more about that later, okay? So as the conquistadors struck out from Mexico City to quote-unquote tame, I know, nasty, okay, the indigenous people, they spread a lot of death, not only through destruction and massacre, but also through European diseases that took the lives of almost 2/3 of Mexico's Indian population during the 16th century alone. That is unbelievable. So the first missionaries arrived shortly after the fall of the Aztecs, and most of the missionary work was done by the Catholic orders of the Franciscans, the Dominicans, the Augustinians, and the Jesuits. So 35 years after the first dozen Franciscans arrived, there were 800 missionaries in Mexico alone. And contemporary reports actually say that the Franciscans alone probably baptized about 5 million, roughly 1% of the world population at the time, although these reports are pretty tough to verify. I mean, Catholics, we write everything down, but for the most part, pretty tough to verify. So the priests, they built new towns and villages for their converts. They constructed huge churches, larger than a lot of the cathedrals in Europe. The Jesuits took it to an even higher level in South America, where hundreds of thousands they lived in Jesuit-run autonomous colonies. they kind of complete with their own Jesuit armies. Watch the movie The Mission. Look at all the different communities that were built, the cooperative communities that were built. But the story of what this show is about begins in the early hours of December 9th, 1531, when a 57-year-old Indian peasant named Juan Diego was walking along the path of the Tepeyac Hill on the outskirts of Mexico City. Now, keep in mind that only 10 years earlier, Hernando Cortez had conquered Mexico City. Okay, keep in mind everything we talked about. In 1523, Franciscan missionaries came evangelizing Indian people, super successful. Diocese of Mexico City was established 1528. Remember that actually Jamestown, the first permanent English colony, was not established until 1607. So this is a while ago, okay? Juan Diego and a lot of his family members were among these early converts to the faith. He was baptized, Juan Diego, 1525, along with his wife, Maria Lucia, and his uncle, Juan Bernardino, okay? So one, you can't forget, Juan Diego had grown up under Aztec oppression, okay? We've talked a little bit about it's just so hard to get all the information is, but the Aztec religious practices, which did include human sacrifice, that's, archaeologically proved, okay? They play a really interesting role in kind of his story. Every major Aztec city had a temple pyramid about 100 feet high, on top of which was an altar. On the altar, the Aztec priests offered human sacrifice to their god. And actually, the Quechuan way of saying it, there's no way I can say it. It's like, okay? But it meant lover of hearts and drinker of blood. That's actually what the god's name meant. So by cutting out the beating hearts of their victims, usually adult men, but often children, that was where the sacrifice took place. So considering that the Aztecs controlled 371 towns and the law required 1,000 human sacrifices for each town with a temple pyramid, over 50,000 human beings were sacrificed every year. Whoa, right? The early Mexican historians estimate that 1 out of every 5 children fell victim to this bloodthirsty religion. That is unbelievable. But in 1487, when Juan Diego was just 13 years old, he would have witnessed some of these events. The famous Tlactel, the 89-year-old Aztec ruler, dedicated a new temple pyramid of the sun, dedicated the 2 chief gods of the Aztec pantheon, the god of hell and the god of darkness, in what is now Mexico City. So the temple pyramid, 100 feet high, 114 steps, more than 80,000 people were sacrificed over a period of 4 days and 4 nights on this particular festival. And while these sacrifices seem just incredible, it took only about 15 seconds to cut the heart out of each victim. Unbelievable. There's a lot of information about this in Our Lady of Guadalupe and the Conquest of Darkness by Dr. Warren Carroll. Definitely worth reading and checking out. All right, nevertheless, in 1520, Cortez outlaws human sacrifice, right? He stripped the temple pyramid of its 2 idols, cleansed the stone of its blood, and erected a new altar. And Cortez and his soldiers and Father Olmedo then ascended the stairs with the Holy Cross and images of the Blessed Mother and St. Christopher and put on this new altar. Father Olmedo actually offered the sacrifice of the Mass on the same altar upon what had basically been this pagan sacrifice, now kind of unbloody. The eternal and true sacrifice of our Lord was offered. And this was a big deal. It sparked an all-out war with the Aztecs, whom Cortez finally, subdued in 1521. Now, take that however you want to. Native religion versus European religion, we can go rounds on that if you want to, but there's some serious transitioning going on here from sacrifice to sacrifice. All right, now back to the main story. Juan Diego, he's headed to Mass in the morning. He walks along the Tepeyac Hill. He began to hear beautiful strains of music, and he saw a beautiful lady who called his name Juan Dieguito. He approached, and she said, "Know for certain, least of my sons, that I am the perfect and perpetual Virgin Mary, Mother of Jesus, the true God, through whom everything lives, the Lord of all things near and far, the Master of heaven and earth. It's my earnest wish that a temple be built here to my honor. Here I will demonstrate, I will manifest, I will give all my love, my compassion, my help, and my protection to the people. I am your merciful mother, the merciful mother of all you who live united in this land and of all mankind, of all those who love me, of those who cry to me, of those who seek me, and those who have confidence in me. Here I will hear their weeping, their sorrow, and will remedy and alleviate all their multiple sufferings, necessities, and misfortunes. Woo! There's a reason why she is Our Lady of the Americas, okay? She told Juan Diego to go tell the bishop, Bishop Zumarraga, of her desire for a church to be built right there. And tradition holds that Juan Diego actually asked our Blessed Mother her name, very Old Testament, right? And she responds in his native language of Nahuatl, and there's no way I can say this word, Tlecutlecupe is how you say Mary's name in his native language, which means the one who crushes the head of the serpent. That's where that image comes from. A clear reference to Genesis 3:15. And also to the Aztec religion. So she correctly pronounced the name when you say it in the native language sounds similar to Guadalupe. And when Juan Diego told Bishop Zumarraga her name in his native tongue, he probably confused it with the familiar Spanish name, Guadalupe, a city with a prominent Marian shrine. But it actually sounds a little bit different. Interesting. The things you learn, right? So the bishop, he was a really saintly guy. Very just, very compassionate. He built the first hospital, library, university in the Americas. He was also like the protector of the natives. He was entrusted by the Emperor Charles V to enforce his decree in 1530, saying, quote, "No person shall dare to make a single Indian a slave, whether in war or in peace, whether by barter, by purchase, by trade, or any other pretext or cause whatever." So he was a big advocate, okay? And in 1537, Pope Paul III condemned and forbade the enslavement of Native American Indians altogether. Anyway, Bishop listened patiently to Juan Diego, and he said he would reflect on the matter and then just kind of doubted the story. And just remember, the bishop is a good guy, okay? Juan Diego goes back to Tepeyac, and he reports the bishop's response, and Mary instructed him to try again. So the next day he did, although this time it was way more difficult to see the bishop. So Juan Diego prevailed, and the bishop once more listened patiently. However, the bishop said, "Bring back a sign from Mary to prove the story." So Juan Diego reports the matter to our Blessed Mother, goes back to her, who told him to return the next day to receive the sign for the bishop. And on December 11th, Juan Diego spent the day caring for his very sick uncle, Juan Bernardino. He asked Juan Diego to go and bring a priest who would hear his confession and administer last rites. And on December 12th, Juan Diego set out again, but avoided the hill at where he had seen Mary because he was actually kind of ashamed that he had not returned the previous day as our Blessed Mother had requested. So while making this little detour, the Blessed Mother stopped him and said, "Hear and let it penetrate into your heart, my dear little son. Let nothing discourage you, nothing depress you. Let nothing alter your heart or your countenance. Also, do not fear any illness or vexation, anxiety or pain. Am I not here, who am your mother? Are you not under my shadow and protection? Am I not your fountain of life? Are you not in the folds of my mantle, in the crossing of my arms? Is there anything else that you need?" So Mary, right, reassures Juan Diego that his uncle is not going to die. In fact, his health had been totally restored. And as for the sign from the bishop, Mary tells Juan Diego, go to the top of the mountain, pick some flowers. He went up to the hill, which was totally dry and barren, a place for like cactus, and he found roses, like those grown like in Castile, but foreign to Mexico. They weren't even native to Mexico. And he gathered them in his tilma, like a kind of a poncho, like a garment around him. And he brought them to Mary, who arranged them and said to them to take him to the bishop. So Juan Diego then goes back to the bishop's house after waiting a really long time for an audience. He repeats the message to the bishop, and then he opens up his poncho, his tilma, to present the roses. And the bishop saw not only the flowers, but also this really beautiful image of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And then the bishop wept right at the sight of the Blessed Mother, and he begged for forgiveness for doubting. And then he took the tilma and he laid it at the altar in his chapel. And by Christmas of that year, kind of an adobe structure was actually built atop Tepeyac Hill in honor of our Blessed Mother, Our Lady of Guadalupe. And it was dedicated on December 26, 1531, the feast of St. Stephen the Martyr. So December 9th marks the feast day of St. Juan Diego, and December 12th, the feast day of Our Lady of Guadalupe. How awesome is that, right? I love church traditions like that. It's just so good, right? There's just so much grace in the story. Here's the thing. Like saints, right? We talk about this a lot on the show. Saints sometimes get kind of a bad rap. Like, oh, they're holier than we are. Oh, I could never be that. Juan Diego is like the most accessible saint for all of us, especially our Hispanic Latino brothers and sisters, because he's like this simpleton. And the part of his story that I really, really, really hope you get is he comes from a people that had been dramatically oppressed, right? He comes from a people that were very just violent. Like the culture was violent, and still finds holiness in conversion. I mean, think about the timeline of this story. He was not super removed from the grotesqueness, not only of the human sacrifice of that particular cultural tribe, but of the human sacrifice of Cortez, who was not a good guy, even though he's marching around in the name of the Pope trying to bring conversion. I mean, we hope that these Franciscans understood at least the basic principles of the human condition in conversion and evangelization. But the reality is Juan Diego is just this simple guy. And our mother, she just inserts herself into his reality. And then as a result, of course, right, completely changes the way we relate to her, certainly in the Americas. And then I love in the story how the bishop plays such a huge role. The bishop he's a good bishop. Like he's a good guy, but you can't just let anyone come off the street, walk into your chancery and be like, yeah, this is this. I've been talking to the Lord. He wants you to do this. I mean, this bishop did the right thing, like straight up the right thing, right? He's tracking with reality, and he still listens to the story. And then, of course, when he's faced with the giftedness, the miraculousness of this image, the roses, he knows he assumes the proper position. He goes right to his knees. He knows, oh my gosh, this is it. This is her. This is Our Lady. And there's a reason why her language, which I wanted to read specifically in detail, is that of protection. She always steered us towards Christ, but she is our greatest advocate. There's a reason why she's called the Queen of Saints. She is the defeater of the serpent, right? I mean, she is a witness to the ultimate sacrifice. You wonder sometimes why there's such a gorgeous dedication to Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico, among Latin America. And it's not just because that's where the story takes place. It's because she really mends the difference between the sacrifice of the Aztec and the sacrifices of Cortez, both of which are not in the glorifying Christ specifically. She brings healing to that glory. That, to me, I just think that's unbelievable. Our Lady of Guadalupe, pray for us, right? St. Juan Diego, pray for us. What a gorgeous, gorgeous story. I love everything about this narrative. Ooh, I hope that inspires us. And next December, when those feast days come around, you make sure you drop to one knee and say thank you for the giftedness that she provides us. Maybe invite that into your prayer life. That could be an awesome change. Love it. Love it. Oh, I hope our Hispanic brothers and sisters celebrate this show as well. Don't forget to visit renovopodcast.com for past episodes. Please subscribe to, review, and rate our podcast. We always appreciate your input. Your topic suggestions, questions, and or comments are always welcome at doug@renovopodcast.com. Learn more about me on Twitter and Instagram at DTOOKE and the number 1, or at odbfilms.com. Always remember to engage the tradition and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.